When we think of international affairs, we tend to envision diplomats crowded around the General Assembly Hall in the UN, discussing foreign policy and economic stability. Though this is true of the profession and study, international affairs also plays a prominent role in our history and everyday life in ways we wouldn't expect. Most people remember the SARS epidemic of 2003. The initial outbreak was thought to have originated in mainland China, in the Guangdong province. A farmer of the province first reported symptoms in November 2002, was treated in the First People's Hospital Foshan, and died soon after his hospital stay. Chinese government officials did not inform the World Health Organization of the outbreak until February 2003, restricting media coverage in order to preserve public confidence. The government's secrecy caused delays in efforts to control the epidemic, resulting in criticism of the People's Republic of China from the international community. Since then, the People's Republic of China has officially apologized for their failure to comply with standard international regulation, and serves as the perfect example of how one country can affect many others in matters of international health and crisis. Ethnic cleansing, in the broad sense, the forcible deportation of a population, is defined as a crime against humanity under the statutes of the International Criminal Court. The UN Commission of Experts hold that the practices associated with ethnic cleansing constitute crimes against humanity and can be assimilated to specific war crimes. Furthermore, such acts could also fall within the meaning of the Genocide Convention. The UN General Assembly condemned ethnic cleansing and racial hatred in a 1992 resolution. The Rwandan genocide is one of the most brutal and infamous in history. Rwanda is comprised of two main ethnic groups: the Hutus, 85 to 90% of the population, and the Tutsis, 10 to 15% of the population. The Tutsis were the ruling class. After independence from Belgium in 1962, the Hutu majority seized power, oppressing the Tutsis, many of whom fled and formed a rebel guerrilla army, the Rwandan Patriotic Front. The Tutsi rebels invaded Rwanda and forced the Hutu president to accept a power-sharing agreement. In October 1993, the first elected Hutu president of Burundi was assassinated, sparking conflict, and a UN 2,500-strong peacekeeping force was sent to preserve a ceasefire, while Rwandan and Burundi presidents met to work out a peace plan. After their plane was shot down, the Hutus began an unprecedented killing spree, while the international community watched in horror and did nothing. In July 1994, Tutsi rebels defeated the Hutus, stopping the genocide, which had claimed over 800,000 lives, more than 10% of Rwanda's population. In this day and age of simplified life with advanced household technology, we pay the price with the imminent, man-made threat of weapons of mass destruction. A key player when discussing world politics and superpowers, WMDs are a major concern of organizations such as the UN, who are determined to end nuclear proliferation. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons is an international treaty opened for signature on July 1, 1968, to limit the spread of nuclear weapons. There are 189 states party to the treaty. Only 4 states are not. 2, India and Pakistan, out of 8 confirmed nuclear powers, and 1 presumed nuclear power, Israel, neither signed nor ratified the treaty. 1 further nuclear power, North Korea, ratified the treaty, violated it, and later withdrew. Upon their withdrawal from the treaty in 2003, North Korea cited the failure of the United States to fulfill its end of the agreed framework, a 1994 agreement between the states to limit North Korea's nuclear ambitions, begin normalization of relations, and help North Korea supply some energy needs through nuclear reactors. On October 9, 2006, the North Korean government issued an announcement that it had successfully conducted a nuclear test for the first time. Both the United States Geological Survey and Japanese seismological authorities detected an earthquake with a preliminary estimated magnitude of 4.2 on the Richter scale in North Korea. North Korea has been said to be using their nuclear wealth as a bargaining chip with the world community. The majority of the international community says the United States is partially to blame for the fact that North Korea's wishes have not been at all acknowledged, and thus is not one step closer to reaching a peaceful resolution. According to John Pfeffer, co-director of the think tank Foreign Policy in Focus, the primary problem is that the current U.S. administration fundamentally doesn't want an agreement with North Korea. Pfeffer says, the Bush administration considers the 1994 agreed framework to have been a flawed agreement. It doesn't want to be saddled with a similar agreement, for if it did sign one, it would then be open to charges of appeasing Pyongyang. The vice president has summed up the approach as, We don't negotiate with evil, we defeat evil. Though there is no universal definition of terrorism, there is an intellectual consensus that acts of terror should not be accepted under any circumstances. This is reflected in all important conventions, including the United Nations Counterterrorism Strategy, the outcome of the Madrid Conference on Terrorism, the outcome of the Strategic Foresight Group, and ALDE roundtables at the European Parliament. To us, especially after September 11th, the word terrorism brings to mind kamikaze pilots and organizations such as Al-Qaeda. Though these are legitimate and very real examples, the scope of terrorism reaches even further into the world around us, with perpetrators as close as governments in the West. From the 1950s to the 1980s, right-wing dictatorships dominated the southern cone in South America, using state terrorism and government intelligence operations. This systemic state terrorism, relying heavily on numerous assassinations, was aimed at deterring democratic and left-wing influence in the regions, as well as controlling active or potential opposition movements against these governments. The repression, known as Operation Condor, caused an unknown number of deaths due to the covering up by the different governments responsible. Among the involved governments were Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay. According to the terror archives discovered in Paraguay in 1992, 50,000 persons were murdered, 30,000 disappeared, known as los desaparecidos, and 400,000 were incarcerated.